back to Onto Punts Off Season. I'm your host, Ollie. Today I'm joined by the Brummie Viking, Dave Keane, and the draft connoisseur, Jim. How are you boys doing? You all good?
I am good, but the last time we spoke about calling Jim the draft connoisseur, you were getting fed up of writing it and you were going to change it to something that was easier to write, like
We actually used the full government name as well, which I wasn't a huge fan of. But
We edited that out, mate. Yeah, nice I am. And I've learned how to spell connoisseur consistently now because I'm doing it in every description. So
you're over that one. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
No, really good because some big news we can react to, right?
Yeah.
Still Kirkless as well, so let's focus on the positives, right?
Yeah, still Kirkless. What is this, the fourth week of being Kirkless?
Glory be to whoever you want.
Dave alluded to it. There's been some breaking news in the NFL world. Stefon Diggs has been traded from the Buffalo Bills to the Houston Texans. The Texans received a 5th and 6th round pick and Buffalo received a 2nd round pick in exchange for Stefon Diggs. Boys, what do you make of the trade? We'll start with the Texans' perspective. How do you think they've done out of it?
I mean, the trade's getting a lot of love for the Texans on the old interweb at the moment. Bills fans aren't happy. Texans fans are happy, it's always a sign that I think the masses think one team have won that trade. Me personally, I don't love it for the Texans. I think they've got a very young, impressionable offense. They've got a couple of young receivers in Nico Collins and Tank Dell, along with CJ Stroud at quarterback, obviously. So, and Diggs, over the last 18 months in Buffalo, hasn't been particularly happy with his usage. He's going to demand a lot of targets. He gets a lot of attention as well. And to be fair to him, he's been productive. He massively tailed off at the end of last year in terms of production. It's a case of the Texans adding an experienced wide receiver. I can't really see the need for him personally. I mean, they still had enough to get to the playoffs after both of their receivers went down last year. So a little bit surprised, to be honest with you. Not surprised he's been traded, just surprised that he's gone to the Texans. I think it might be a concerted effort from the Texans to get a bit older on offense with their signing of Joe Mixon the trade for Joe Mixon, not signing. So, yeah, I'm a little bit on the fence about this one. Look, you love Stefon Diggs at the Vikings, and for at the start of his tenure with the Bills, obviously very productive. But will that carry over to the Texans? But my bigger concern is his impact on the locker room.
I saw something earlier about someone tweeted that, is a wide receiver is Stefon Diggs that important to Josh Allen's success in Buffalo? And Diggs retweeted and put, "You sure?" And then the next day he's been traded. He's a bit of a prima donna. Dave, do you think that's, like Jim alluded to, do you think that's going to have an effect on the Texans locker room with such a young coach, young players?
Can't believe I'm going to leap to the defense of Stefon Diggs, but when he first arrives at the team, he's a very good teammate. You don't need to worry about that. He knows how to conduct himself. He knows how to get along with people. He is a very personable chap. I'll admit that I'm a little bit surprised that the Texans went in for him. Simply because they do have Nico Collins and Tank Dell, but Tank Dell did get quite a serious injury last year, so maybe their thinking is making sure that they've got a 1-2 punch from the start of the season might well help them to achieve overall success, because if you're relying on Tank Dell coming back and immediately being the prolific playmaker that he was as a rookie, it might be a little bit challenging, bearing in mind he's going to be in rehab for a while with the injury that he's got. Was it an ACL tear or an Achilles?
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah, it was a major injury anyway. He was a player that showed an awful lot of promise as a rookie, and had an excellent connection with Stroud. Now, Stroud, I think, is his own man. He's not the kind of guy to be particularly influenced. And how can I put this? I think it will get on perfectly well with Stefon Diggs. I think that Diggs will be up for doing the off-season workouts to try to develop a chemistry with them. He'll work incredibly hard. He knows how to be a good teammate. I think sometimes he gets a little bit frustrated when things aren't right behind the scenes. He pulled the trigger on leaving Minnesota when it was unknown to the fans, but it was becoming a little bit dysfunctional behind the scenes in terms of the tension between Mike Zimmer, who I've had a lot of love for, but he just seemed to become frustrated with the efforts of Rick Spielman as a general manager, and those two clashed and butted heads. And Rick was a more personable guy, and it got a little bit political there. And it had been previously alluded to. The Vikings had a tight end, a backup tight end, who went to the Giants. I can't remember his name, but his father came out and said that the Vikings coaching staff had created a toxic environment. The Vikings had an excellent start to the season, where for some reason during the tie week, the players came in to find stuffed animals that had been disemboweled, left all over the place, and it was meant to be a message which was fat cats get killed, as in don't get too full of yourselves. It had the opposite effect. It seemed to put a downer on that whole dressing room. So Diggs leaving with Vikings at the time, it's understandable.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at what went on last year between Brian DeBall and sorry, not DeBall. He's in New York. I've gone.
The one who looks like Bill Burr.
Yeah, the Bills head coach. Come on. This is going to need some editing, boys.
Sean McDermott.
Thank you.
Sean McDermott.
Do you know what it is? Too many McDaniels in the league. I knew McDaniels was wrong, and that's what popped in my head. Sean McDermott.
Yeah.
So Sean McDermott had issues with his staff last year. So maybe things aren't quite right with the Bills. And maybe that's why the Bills fans are reacting the way they are to the trade and feeling that maybe time's up, is maybe because they're getting a little bit sick and tired of the apparent inability to maintain a harmonious locker room. So, yeah, Diggs has done it again. He's manoeuvred his way out of the team. He wasn't wrong to leave the Vikings when you think about the purgatory that we were stuck in thereafter.
Yeah. It benefited both at the time as well, the Bills and the Vikings, how it turned out.
Very much so. We got a very good wide receiver for much cheaper money. During a transitional period where Diggs wouldn't have been able to help us anyway, there's no way we were going to be throwing the ball enough to feed both Jefferson and Diggs. And without, of course, getting the Bills pick for Jefferson, we would never have been able to take Justin Jefferson.
Exactly.
So I think that this may work out for the Texans. My issue is more on the field. His production has waned. Now, is that because he was getting open and being ignored, which did happen sometimes? Or is it because he's a 30-year-old wide receiver in the NFL who relied on his athleticism to allow his excellent route running to manifest itself in the space that he created? And if you just lose that little edge, maybe it can be more difficult to get open, and as a result, quarterbacks don't target you as much. So I'm just intrigued by the whole way it's going to play out.
Yeah, I mean, my concern's similar to yours in terms of on-field production. I think, like we said, he fell off a little bit with the Bills last year. The Bills were dysfunctional. They sat their offensive coordinator in Ken Dorsey Jr., I think after about 9 games last year. And it was a bit of a myth that the Bills' offense got better after they sacked him. So it wasn't a case of that wasn't the case. They got rid of Dorsey Jr. to try and wake Josh Allen up a little bit, and while it did to an extent, it saw the play calling go a little bit all over the place. So he could have fallen victim to that a little bit. My thoughts are that he just, like you've just said, he's a 30-year-old wide receiver. He's got 2 years left on his contract that he signed in April 22 with the Bills. So I know that the Texans are going to be on the hook for not much of that this year due to his dead cap hit of around $31 million. But next year, the Texans are going to be looking at around about 24 to 25 million as a 31, nearly 32-year-old wide receiver. That because of their young core, they've probably got the flexibility to absorb that. So the Texans will be okay from a money perspective. I'm just not sure that the production will be there for those full 2 years. We've seen it happen with some superstar wide receivers over the last 3 or 4 years in terms of Julio Jones, AJ Green, Odell Beckham Jr. Their productions fell off a cliff as soon as they've got to the wrong side of 30. It's a similar story for running backs when they fall off a cliff when they hit over 28, 29. So, yeah, I mean, the jury's out for me on the Texans acquiring him. I mean, we should look at the compensation. They've given, the Texans have given them the Bills the 2025 Vikings pick for in the second round, which could be a reasonably high pick, which won't make you guys happy. But based off where the bookies are sort of positioning the Vikings at the moment, that could well be in the sort of late 30s, early 40s from an overall pick perspective.
I think we've got one of the lowest predicted win totals in the entire league, possibly the fourth lowest, which would, of course, manifest itself as the 36th pick in the next year's draft.
And I think, and if that's the case, that's quite a lot. That's quite a lot to give up because you'll get the first round fallers that fall to a 36, 37 in the second round. So there's good value to be had there from a draft perspective. But overall, when you look at it, next year's second round pick is pretty much the equivalent to this year's third round pick. They've also, given a fifth and a sixth back. So I think if you add all of that compensation up together, it probably comes in at around the Keenan Allen piece, Keenan Allen sort of trade compensation, which I think if you look at it is probably fair. And ultimately, I don't hate the trade. I just don't see it. I didn't see it as a need. I wouldn't be. I wouldn't have shipped what's likely to be, a pick within the top 40 for him at that point. And like we've said, the stuff around him being a bit of a prima donna and things is always a concern. But you got Dave, like you said, you know him better than I do for sure. For those glory years as the Vikings when he ran past the New Orleans Saints and helped you progress in the playoffs. Maybe he's still got. Is it the Saints? But he's still got a bit left in the tank.
Was it the Saints? Let's just revisit that moment.
We don't need to revisit that. This is about the Stefon trade.
That particular moment probably does mean that I'm a little bit biased in Stefon Diggs' favour, mainly because and this is something you should link in the show notes, Al.
Yeah.
There's the videos of the reactions of Saints fans to the miracle in Minneapolis.
I've seen them.
Which, for those that haven't, it's one of the most joyous,
my favourite
experiences ever.
Now Broncos head coach Sean Payton, who was the coach of the Saints, doing the skull clap, taking the mick, because, they'd all thought the Saints had won. I mean, how many seconds was there left on the clock? Was it 9 when they made the snap or something like that? And then
it
wasn't much. It wasn't much.
I think it was either 9 or 7 seconds, but it was Case Keenum under pressure, tossed it up. Stefon Diggs went up for the ball. Marcus Williams decided he didn't want to foul him, so decided not to hit him, which meant that Stefon Diggs landed, turned.
And he nearly fell down. His arm kept him up.
Through his helmet. Oh, glorious. Anyway, so yeah, Stefon Diggs now with Houston Texans. He is going to at least ensure that they've got a good 1-2 punch at wide receiver next year, just in case Tank Dell is maybe not going to be ready as soon as people think. Now, this is also a good wide receiver draft class as well. It surprises me a little bit that the Bills didn't hold out for a pick this year, because I'm struggling to see how they're going to supplement their offense. Who are their wide receivers now?
Well, I couldn't tell you.
Shakur?
Shakur Stevenson.
He was some 4th round pick from, I think, BYU maybe last year or the year before. But ultimately, I think the Bills.
Khalil Shakir.
Yeah.
And they also have got Curtis Samuel, who's think of him as like this is probably insulting to Curtis Samuel, but a poor man's Deebo Samuel. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's good at taking the ball in and out of the backfield, and he can actually stretch the field a little bit as well. But maybe
isn't he coming up to the wrong side of 30 as well, though, off the top of my head?
Yeah, he is. No, he's 27. He's 27.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, they've just signed him from the Commanders, and we know what a prolific offense that was last year.
Well, 4 touchdowns for 62 receptions for 613 yards.
He's on his got Matt Collins. He's on his third team in 20, at the age of 27. So Curtis Samuel, a mid-range slot receiver, maybe. Khalil Shakir on the outside, maybe. I think it leaves them with a pretty big gap. They're obviously picking around, I think they're picking 24, 25, I think, this year, which will put them out of range for the top 3 or 4 wide receivers in this class. They do have some ammo now to go and get one if they do want to do that, but I think this year's draft is going to be particularly expensive to move up in.
Whatever they're drafting?
I want to say mid-20s, 24, 25.
Okay.
Well, just to put it out there,
to work out if there's any way the Vikings could get that second round pick back.
Just to put it out there, Justin Jefferson was drafted at 22 from the Diggs trade originally, so who knows who the Bills might take. But
and whilst there are 3 excellent wide receivers in this draft, which we will do more in-depth studies on later this offseason, there's also more than those 3. So maybe they've got their eye on picking up a couple in the mid rounds to supplement what is looking like a number 1 lowest wide receiver room.
Yeah, I mean, the Bills, in terms of how this looks for the Bills, it doesn't look good from a PR perspective, as we've just covered from a wide receiver room side of things. The compensation, when you ultimately break it down to roughly a 4th round pick, if you add it all in together and take the next year's 2nd as this year's 3rd, are you going to get a better wide receiver in the 4th round than Stefon Diggs? Probably not. I think it's probably fair to say. So interesting. Josh Allen's one of the top, 5 or 6 quarterbacks in the NFL when he is throwing to people like Stefon Diggs. When he's not throwing to people like Stefon Diggs, it's an interesting one. He fell off at the start of last year and got his offensive coordinator fired, like I mentioned earlier on in the show. So interesting one. Bills, like we said, they've done a 4th round pick, fairly cheap, $24 million a year cap it for the that's they've got off their they're absorbing that this year, and then that'll go to the Texans for next year. So not terrible, not good, and I just think the optics of the whole thing, especially as their general manager has been saying they haven't had any calls or they wouldn't be trading Diggs to turn around 3 weeks before the draft and ultimately trade him for what could arguably be not a fantastic package, probably the best package out there, based off what we've seen from his behaviour side of things. So you can't hate it for either side, but for me, you can't love it either. It seems a bit of a middle of the road trade, and but it's got more upside potential for the Texans based off Dave's analysis that he mentioned earlier on in terms of him being willing to be a good teammate at the start before things start to go south. And I think if they get that Stefon Diggs, then yeah, he will open up the Texans offense a little bit, and the Texans will be clear winners of this trade. I do think the Bills are going to have to go shopping for a wide receiver somewhere else now, whether that be T. Higgins from the Bengals, who's probably available for somewhere in the region of a 2nd round pick. I think that could well be an option for them if they miss out on their preferred targets in the draft. I don't see T. Higgins being moved until draft day or very close to draft day till everyone knows exactly what everyone's doing. So I think they're very, very light. And when you've got as much money invested in a franchise quarterback as the Bills have in Josh Allen, you can't afford to waste a year of having no one for him to throw to. So they're going to have to fix that, and they're going to have to fix it quickly. Otherwise, the questions about McDermott, long-term head coach, especially with him like we said, flipping the script last year and getting, deciding his offense just wasn't working. We could start be asking questions about his job security if they do regress this year, which would be a serious concern. Should be a serious concern for the Bills, because the only reason they are relevant at the moment is because of McDermott and their general manager that they've got in place. Is it Brandon Bean or someone like that there? So yeah, ultimately, this could go spectacularly wrong for the Bills. If it goes wrong for the Texans, I haven't given up much ultimately for it. So yeah, I think if anyone's going to win the trade, it'll be the Texans.
In the NFL, there's this idea, and it's mostly true, that you have a period of time where you can be successful and pay everyone. You draft a certain amount of players, maybe you draft a quarterback like the Texans have done with CJ Stroud, and then you can pay a couple superstars. And there's that period, a window where you should be winning championships, should be winning Super Bowls. Do you boys think, Dave, I'm going to ask you first, that the Texans are kind of entering that period and the Bills might be leaving that window of opportunity to win things? Because the Bills have lost multiple defensive players. They've lost Stefon Diggs. Sean McDermott, like Jim just alluded to, could be on the hot seat if this all goes wrong. And the Texans have found a brilliant quarterback in Stroud. They've signed Mixon at running back, Daniil Hunter for some experience alongside this youth. What's your thoughts on, the Texans maybe becoming a team in that window of opportunity and the Bills leaving it?
So there's a particular thing that allows a team to be able to afford to ensure they've got a few superstars at the backbone of their roster, not in the QB positions. And that is simply a rookie contract. So the Bills are now working their way through the more expensive portion of the first extension that Josh Allen signed with them. Whilst the Texans, of course, have got CJ Stroud, who they took at number 3, was it? Or two? Number 2. So they're not even having to pay him the number 1 overall pick wage as a quarterback. That's being paid to Bryce Young. So they can now afford to do things like bring in a veteran player like Daniil Hunter to supplement the defensive side of their roster, choosing to bring him in as a more surefire thing than the potential of Grenard, who went the other way to the Vikings. So there's now 2 former Mike Zimmer stars on the Texans, forming the backbone of a D'Amico Ryan team, right?
Yeah.
Which didn't really expect, but I think that's kind of cool at the same time. So yeah, I'm wishing well for them. But they can afford to do this simply because they've got Stroud on a rookie contract. They've also got Nico Collins. What year is he in? Will this be year?
He's going into year 3.
So he will need to be paid soon, but they don't have to yet. Then they've got Tank Dell, who is on a rookie contract and was only a 3rd rounder, maybe even a 5th rounder for Tank Dell. I mean, it just goes to show you can pick up great players anyway. And you're then in a situation where, because they can afford to spend in this way, you'll see many other teams looking at that with eyes of envy, and it's what the Vikings want to do, right? We're gonna get our rookie quarterback probably this year, maybe next year, who knows? And though I'm pretty sure it'll be JJ. At least that's who they'll want.
JJ.
Yeah. So it's something which is a trend in the NFL. When you have the ability to stay under the cap, not be paying more. I think the stat is it no teams won the Super Bowl paying over 17% of their roster to a quarterback. So it's there's a sweet point which I think is around 13.5%. If I remember the stats from a couple of years ago correctly. So it is a thing. It is a genuine thing that when you have the ability to be able to splash the cash on positions that aren't QB, you can have greater depth, you can have greater higher ceiling players elsewhere. So it is massively helpful, which is why the adage is to build your team before you get your QB.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think Ali made a really good point at the start of this around windows opening and closing. I think the Texans window is wide open now, and it's all for the reasons that Dave's just articulated. The Texans still have CJ Stroud on 4 years more of a very, very affordable salary cap hits, which does allow you to to flesh out the rest of the roster. I mean, the only exception to the quarterback piece winning a Super Bowl is Patrick Mahomes, which I think everyone could probably justify that being the case. I mean, but ironically, you look at the flip side of that. He did not. There's one wide receiver you can probably recall his name that he was throwing to last season. So there's a case for premium positions. Most teams would favour a quarterback obviously over any of the other positions, which is fine. But when you look at the Bills, they ended up having to release a number of their players last year. I think Tre'Davious White was one of them, which was their starting cornerback. I think he was on sort of 13, 14, 15 million. They haven't replaced that cornerback in the draft. They haven't in free agency. Sorry, I should just correct myself. And ultimately, is the Bills window closing? They've got about 4 million left in salary cap room, which is just about enough to sign their draft picks from this year, with a little bit of manoeuvring. So there's not a lot. There's not a lot to play with there. Josh Allen's salary cap hits, I think, just north of 56 million this year, which is obviously in the 20-22% range of the overall salary cap. So I think to say the Bills window is closing unless they absolutely nail this draft, I think is probably fairly accurate. Even if they trade for T. Higgins, for example, they're going to have to trade for him with with 31 million dead cap on the books from the Diggs trade. Can you afford to pay another wide receiver? Not at the moment, unless they either ship out some players or restructure Josh Allen's contract, which pushes his cap hit up to close to 70 million for the remaining 3 years of his contract, which just isn't sustainable, to be perfectly honest. So in terms of windows opening and closing, the Texans' window is wide open. They have to pray to anyone that they need to pray to that CJ Stroud doesn't have a sophomore slump. It didn't look like it was coming. You can sometimes see that from a rookie quarterback. But in this situation, CJ Stroud balled out last year with relative no-name wide receivers. Like we said, he's added Diggs now, so that could go. But at the same time, by doing that, expectations have been raised. Can he meet those expectations? I think he probably can. He's a very accurate quarterback, good arm, seems to have a decent head on his shoulders as well, as far as that can go. So, but from a Bills perspective, they should be worried. They've got a decent defensive line. Their linebacker rooms is good as well. But on the back end of that defense, they also had to release Jordan Poyer, who's been their starting safety for the last sort of 5-6 years, possibly longer, who's been one of the top safeties in the NFL for that period of time. So, these pieces do come at a cost. You can't pay everybody, as you said, unless you've got a quarterback on a rookie contract, as both you and Dave have said. So from that side of things, the window is wide open for the Houston Texans. They obviously don't have a first-round pick this year, because that's your guys now. But they've still got their second. Be interesting to see where they go with that. They'll probably end up going defense. It would be my opinion on that one. Probably looking for another corner opposite. Is it Singletary, their other cornerback that they've got? Stingley, that's the one. Yeah, Singletary's the running back. I think they'll probably have to go. They'll probably end up going there if there's something available in the second round. It's a wait and see thing. But ultimately, if you have to pick a winner on the trade, it's the Texans. And watching the Bills fans cry on Twitter is always good.
And the AFC South is like it's an interesting division, but it's a very winnable one. Jags, Colts, and Titans. I don't think it's that tough. Maybe the Jags would be the closest opposition to maybe winning that division.
The Colts will feel they're going to have Richardson back.
Yeah,
and they've been making strides apparently. The Jags are sitting there having just seen Calvin Ridley decide to go elsewhere for a little bit more money.
Tennessee.
Tennessee look awful, based on what they left behind last year and the players that they've lost. But we do have Jeffrey Simmons, who's an absolute monster. Still, for me, probably the best three technique, who's left in the league now. Aaron Donald's gone. So it's just, it looks to me like this trade has made the Texans a red hot favourites, because you've got to say the Stroud so far adjusted to the NFL quicker than Lawrence. Richardson's still a rookie.
Yeah.
I mean, who else?
It's not close. It's not even close in that division for me. The Texans have spent well in free agency. Daniil Hunter coming over from the Vikings, obviously. They've gone after Mixon, who the jury's out on him a little bit, but I mean for a 7th round pick that was going to be cut with no guaranteed money, it's not much of a gamble. Adding Diggs to Tank Dell and Nico Collins gives them comfortably the best receiver room in that division. So I think the Texans are set up for, to be fair, somewhat unchallenged for the next couple of years would be my expectation in that division. And yeah, I mean the Jags. The Jags are the Jags, right? They go up and they go down, and no one really ever knows what to expect with them. Trevor Lawrence is due another contract.
So just going back to the Jags for a second, they signed Gabe Davis from the Bills, and I saw Doug Pederson saying that Gabe Davis is like a Swiss Army knife for his offense. I only ever saw Gabe Davis run post routes.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. I've never seen him run anything other than a stop and go.
So I'm intrigued to see whether or not Davis was massively mismanaged at the Bills, which would again supplement Diggs' points that things aren't right there. So we'll see.
And if we bring it all back here, Stefon Diggs, the ultimate winners of the Stefon Diggs sweepstakes when we consider the trade from the Vikings to the Bills and everything else, the overall winner here is the Vikings, right? You got Justin Jefferson off this one, the best wide receiver in the league.
Josh
Metellus, like current leader of the Brian Flores defense, and was another player taken with one of the supplementary picks, I believe.
6th round pick.
So yeah, I think when we look at it as a whole, you have to say that the Vikings have won this one overall, and it hurts me to say that just because
somehow we got it tied back to the Vikings, Dave. It's not a video about it.
It's not anyone's fault. They have got our second next year, and if that's really high, maybe that throws a whole thing back into.
Yeah, well, that could happen. If you're terrible this year, then maybe the Bills do win with their production out of Diggs, but they didn't win a Super Bowl. They paid him a lot of money. They've shipped him off for the equivalent of a 4th round pick, and he caused problems for their offense. So it is what it is. For me, Vikings win with the best wide receiver in the league, and like you said, Martellus leading your defense. So yeah, it comes around in circles. I think at the time everyone was like, you didn't get much you didn't get as much as you could have for Diggs. But like we said, that was due to the dysfunction. But actually, when it often takes a couple of years for a draft or a trade to play out properly, and when now this trade has played out over the last sort of 4 years or so, I think we can comfortably say, I don't think there'd be many people in the league that wouldn't take Justin Jefferson over Stefon Diggs, even as a rookie. To be fair, did just a different breed. So and yeah, I'm just delighted we haven't discussed my Cleveland Browns and my quarterback on this one. So I'm very happy with that.
So we talked about the Bills and window of opportunity. If it is their window closing, I do want to ask, is it bad luck or where did they go wrong? Because they haven't won a Super Bowl. They haven't won an AFC championship. They've got arguably a top 5 quarterback, and they had Stefon Diggs, especially when they first got him. He was very productive for them. Dave, where do you think it went wrong for the Bills?
You can track the decline of the Bills back to Brian Daboll leaving and going. No, I never say his name correctly. I do apologise for that. But him heading off to the New York Giants, they've not been right since then. He was someone who was able to rein Josh Allen's Brett Favre-esque tendencies a little bit, made him look after the ball a little bit better. And it is a Josh Allen thing to try to be the hero. Put the team on his back. Sometimes you just have to take what the defense is giving you, and then the bigger shots will open up as the defense adjusts to that. And I think that's what Brian Daboll had that offense doing incredibly well. Plus, there was a little bit more about the running game, both from Josh Allen and from the running backs. Although, is it James Cook, Dalvin's little brother? He showed himself to be a good player. He's just not the kind of but not the kind of backfield player that will be able to wear a team down.
That's perfect. That's a perfect way to put it. I think the way with the Bills that we look at, they're quite top heavy from a stars perspective. They don't have a lot of depth, and as we see in the NFL season after season, star players get hurt, and when they do get hurt, then play falls off. I know the Bills have been fairly lucky in that respect. They're not lucky in the sense that they play against Patrick Mahomes, which I think is a big reason why the Bills haven't got to where they could have got to. They also haven't, they've picked up good value draft picks, but have they been needs? Have they filled needs? And the answer again is probably no. If you could have installed a top level running back into that Bills offense that took a bit of pressure off the wide receiver game, then that would have made a big difference. Their offensive line has been, average. It's sort of middle of the road. It's not great. It's not terrible. But they're much better in, I think it's pass protection than they are in run blocking. And when you're playing in Buffalo, where if you want to see an NFL game played in the snow, it's always in Buffalo. You need to rely on that ground game a little bit, and I think they haven't really done that, and they haven't supplemented the pieces they have. They'll pay their players well. Their top corner that they released this year, Poyer as their safety, they were all paid well and in their sort of top 5 to 10 in their position. Diggs was obviously paid as a top 5 wide receiver up until recently, so they'll pay. And Josh Allen's a top 5 paid quarterback, so they'll pay their stars. They've still got a couple more to pay in terms of Ed Oliver, and is it Russo? Is that their other one that they've got? Pass rusher, Gregory Russo.
Yeah, Gregory Russo.
So they've still got more to pay. But with Josh Allen, the question marks coming out of the draft: is he an accurate quarterback? Quarterbacks look a lot more accurate when they've got a top 5 wide receiver to throw to. He won't have that next year. So if we do see the Josh Allen that played the first 9 games of last year for a longer period, I think he could well end up putting McDermott's job at risk. He could end up putting their general manager's job at risk. Buffalo have had new owners in the last 2 or 3 years. Yeah, it's Brandon Beane. Buffalo have had new owners in the last couple of years. And I think this is a holdover from the previous regime. So if I don't start seeing the success, I don't even think they need to win. I think they need to be shown to me making ground on people like the Chiefs. And
that's going to be difficult because even in their own division, we've got the return of Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
They've got the Dolphins who are going to be another year along under McDaniels, and he's got a new defensive coordinator in this year, but he thinks he's going to be able to offer a more complementary style to what he's trying to do on offense, which, bearing in mind, I saw about English journalist basically say to him it was a form of exotic smash mouth kamikaze style. Maybe he wants to be very blitz heavy. I wonder if the ideal for him wouldn't have been Brian Flores as the DC in Miami. So it's an interesting one there. So I mean, apart from the Patriots, who I don't think any of us are expecting to be good, and we're expecting some poor quarterback to basically be put in the worst possible situation in the league unless they do trade out of that number 3 spot. It's not exactly looking rosy for the Bills. If you've got the Jets and the Dolphins on the ascendancy, if they finish below the Patriots, then that is people getting fired. Very much so, regardless of who the Patriots take in the draft. There's no way they should be ready. They've had a talent deficiency that's been supplemented by the greatest quarterback and a great head coach for a while. And when the greatest quarterback left, the head coach ended up getting fired, didn't they? So,
I just can't agree with their approach of stripping out the offensive weapons and hope and gambling on Josh Allen. I think it's such a huge risk.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, you're literally asking him to justify every penny of that $56 million, and maybe that's the point. Maybe Sean McDermott is going to war with his own quarterback.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me.
So, boys, I have one last burning question for you. How rubbish is Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns? Dave?
I'll go first. I actually think the Browns are an improving franchise. They're on the rise. They've just seemed to have got themselves a guy who can't actually throw a ball anymore. Jim, over to you, mate.
Thanks for that. Yeah, from a Browns perspective, the rest of the roster's in good shape. We kept most of the people we wanted to keep. We've added Jerry Jeudy on the offense. Whether that pays off or not will remain to be seen. Deshaun Watson needs to be the quarterback that he was for the Texans. Although what I would add was Deshaun Watson used to be up on bad teams for the Texans. We've covered the division that the Texans play in terms of the Jags and the Titans and the Colts. You know, playing those twice a year from a defensive quality perspective is always going to help a quarterback's stat sheet. So Deshaun Watson, was he ever as good as people thought he was? I think he's arguable. I don't think you'll find many Browns fans that were a fan of the trade and what we gave up for him. We did need a quarterback, I'll say that. Obviously, Baker Mayfield, it was the one that he replaced and has gone on to better things at the Buccaneers. I think it can be fairly safe to say. But in terms of how we're going to do next year, Deshaun Watson's a player that could well end up getting our general manager and head coach fired. Is the way that I look at it. It never felt like an Andrew Berry proposal. Although what I would say, I think if the view was that we were a quarterback away, then he would have gone and got that quarterback. But yeah, the proof will be in the pudding. But at the end of the day, he took 8.5 games to get going last year. Played half a game where he actually looked like a good quarterback and then got injured for the rest of the season. So far out of 16 games, I think we've had 1.5 where he's looked relatively competent, which is it's not a great return on 230 million.
Wasn't it the one just before the latest injury as well? I seem to recall him playing really well.
No, it was the second half against the Ravens. He absolutely ripped him apart. He actually had a broken shoulder at that point as well. So that was the thing that was even more infuriating. Was he actually played much better when his shoulder didn't work properly. So yeah, it's a scary thought, but we shouldn't be in quarterback purgatory, but we could well be in quarterback purgatory again by the 6th game of the season. And that's something I'm not looking forward to as a Cleveland Browns fan.
That entire response has delighted me. Sorry, Jim. So somehow, gents, we've tied this convoluted web of the Minnesota Vikings, Houston Texans, Bills, Stefon Diggs, Cleveland Browns, and Deshaun Watson into one lovely video. To all the punts and puntesses watching, thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe with anyone who may be into American football. Share this video.
Or just sorry if you're a Browns fan, just get involved. So
get involved. Really appreciate you watching. Dave, Jim.
We'll be back with quarterbacks though, mate. Don't forget, you may as well let them know. We're going to be back soon with quarterback rankings, best fits, and
we'll be back soon, as Dave just mentioned, talking about the upcoming 2024 draft, particularly around the quarterbacks. Thank you everyone for watching. Dave, Jim, always a pleasure. See you soon.
Take care.
Cheers.